Myoho Renge Kyo Nam Myoho Renge Kyo Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. And continuing right along on part 2 of conversation between a sage and an unenlightened man. We left off, we were talking about Zen, and we still are. Quote, "You spoke earlier of 28 patriarchs of India who orally transmitted this Zen doctrine, but on what evidence is such a statement based?" All the texts I have seen speak of 24, or in some cases 23 persons who transmitted the Buddha's teachings. Where is the translation that establishes the number of patriarchs as 28? I have never seen such a statement. This matter of the persons who were involved in the line of transmission of the Buddha's teachings is not something that one can simply write about arbitrarily. The Thus Come One himself left a clear record of what the line of transmission would be. Thus, in a history of the Buddha's successors, it states, "There will be a monk by the name of Aryasimha, living in the kingdom of Kashmir, who will strive vigorously to accomplish the Buddha's work. At that time, the ruler of the kingdom will be named Mirakutsu, a man who gives himself up wholly to false views and has no reverence or resolute mind and conviction in his heart. Throughout the kingdom of Kashmir, he will destroy Buddhist temples and stupas and slaughter monks. He will take a sharp sword and use it to cut off Arasimha's head, but no blood will spurt from his neck, only milk will come flowing out. With this, the line of persons who transmit the law will be cut off." To restate this passage, the Buddha says that after he passes into nirvana, there will be a succession of 24 persons who will transmit his teachings. Among these, the last to carry on the line of transmission will be a monk named Aryasimha, who will work to spread the Buddha's teachings throughout the kingdom called Kashmir. The ruler of this state will be a man named King Dhamira. He will be a person of false views and profligate ways, who has no resolute mind and conviction in the Buddha's teachings and no reverence for the monks. He will destroy the Buddhist halls and stupas and use a sword to cut off the heads of monks. And when he cuts off the head of the monk Aryasimha, there will be no blood in his neck, only milk will come flowing out. The Buddha declares that at this time the line of persons who transmit his teachings will be cut off. The actual events did not in any way differ from the Buddha's predictions. The venerable Aryasimha's head was in fact cut off, and as his head fell to the ground, so did the arm of the king. It is a gross error to speak of the 28 patriarchs. This is the beginning of the errors of the Zen school. The reason that Huineng lists 28 patriarchs in his Platform Sutra is that when he decided to treat Bodhidharma as the first patriarch of Chinese Zen, he found that there were too many years between the time of Aryasimha and that of Bodhidharma. He therefore arbitrarily inserted the names of 3 Zen teachers to fill up the interval, so that he could make it seem as though the law had been transmitted from India to China without any break or irregularity in the line of transmission. It was all a fabrication designed to make people respect the Zen teachings. Now this is some scholarship. This deception was put forth long ago in China. Thus the 11th volume of the 3 major works states, "In our Tendai school, we recognize a transmission through 23 patriarchs. How could there be any error in this view? Concerning the claim that there are 28 patriarchs, we can find no translation of a source that supports such a view. Recently, Zen priests have produced carvings in stone and woodblock engravings, each with a sacred verse attached, which represent the 7 Buddhas and the 28 patriarchs, handing these down to their disciples. Alas, how can there be such blatant falsehoods? If persons of understanding have any power at all, they should do everything they can to correct such abuses. This text is, and this is from the 6th century in China, Tendai, right? Qi. This text is saying that to assert a transmission through a line of 28 patriarchs and to produce stone carvings and woodblock engravings of them to indicate the line of transmission are highly mistaken undertakings, and that anyone who understands this should work to correct such errors. This is why I say that patriarchal Zen is a grave, erroneous affair. He's speaking directly about patriarchal Zen because that's what his interlocutor is talking about, and this must have been the popular form at his time in Japan. Earlier you quoted a passage from the Sutra of the Buddha answering the great heavenly king Brahma's questions to prove your contention that Zen is, quote, a separate transmission outside the sutras. But by quoting a sutra passage, you were already contradicting your own assertion. Moreover, this sutra represents the provisional teachings, and in addition, it is not listed either in the Kuai-Yuan or Chen-Yuan era catalog of Buddhist works. Thus, we see that it is a work unlisted in the catalogs and a provisional teaching as well. Hence, the scholars of our time do not refer to it. It cannot be used to prove anything. Coming now to the Lotus Sutra, we should note the groups that benefited when it was preached. When the doctrine of the 100 worlds and 1,000 factors, or 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, was expounded in the theoretical teaching, the people of the 2 vehicles who had been likened to rotten seeds had the seeds of Buddhahood sprout. In the previous 42 years of the Buddha's preaching, these persons had been condemned as incapable of ever attaining Buddhahood. In every gathering and assembly, they heard nothing but curses and slanders spoken against them, and were shunned by all those of the human and heavenly realms, until it seemed that they were destined to die of hunger. But now, when the Lotus Sutra was preached, it was predicted that Shariputra would become the thus come one flower glow, and that Madaglayana would become the first thus come one Tamalapatra, sandalwood fragrance. That Ananda would become mountain sea wisdom, unrestricted power king Buddha. That Rahula, Buddha's son, would become the thus come one stepping on 7 treasure flowers, that the 500 arhats would become thus come one's universal brightness, and that 2,000 voice hearers would become the thus come one's jewel sign. And on the day when the Buddha's lifespan from the time he attained enlightenment in the remote past was revealed, the bodhisattvas, who were as countless as particles of dust, increased their understanding of the way, discarded their still remaining illusions, and attained the last stage before the level of supreme enlightenment. Now, if we examine the commentary of the great teacher Tendai, it states, quote, "The other sutras tell us that although the bodhisattvas may become Buddhas, those persons of the 2 vehicles can never do so. Good people can become Buddhas, we are told, but there is no indication that evil ones can do likewise. Men, it is said, can become Buddhas, but women are branded as messengers of hell. Human and heavenly beings can attain Buddhahood, but it is nowhere stated that non-human creatures can do so. And yet, in this sutra, it is stated that all of these beings can attain Buddhahood. Only in the Lotus. What a wonderful thing it is! Though we have been born in the impure world, in the latter day of the law, we have committed neither the 5 cardinal sins nor the 3 cardinal sins, as Devadatta did, and yet it was predicted that even Devadatta would in time become the thus come one heavenly king. So how much more should it be possible for persons like us, who have committed no such sins, to attain Buddhahood? And the 8-year-old Dragon King's daughter, without changing her reptilian form, attained the wonderful fruit of Buddhahood in the southern realm. Therefore, how much more likely is it that women who have been born into the human realm should be able to do so? It is most difficult to be born in human form and extremely rare to encounter the correct teaching. Now, if you want to rid yourself quickly of erroneous beliefs and adhere to what is correct, transform your status as a common mortal and attain that of Buddhahood, then you should abandon the Nembutsu, true word, Zen, and precepts teachings, and embrace this wonderful text of the single vehicle. If you do so, you will without a doubt be able to shake off the dust and defilement of delusion and impurity and manifest yourself as a pure embodiment of enlightenment. Then the unenlightened man said, quote, excuse me, listening to the teachings and admonitions of a sage like you, I find that the misunderstandings I have labored under in recent days are all suddenly dispelled. It is as though inherent wisdom had awakened within me. When right and wrong are made so clear, who could fail to take resolute mind and conviction? And yet, when I look at the world around me, I find that from the supreme ruler on down to the numberless common people, all place deep trust in the Nembutsu and the true word, Zen, and precepts teachings. Since I've been born in this land, how could I go against the example of the ruler? yet another reasoning that Nichiren will now take on. Moreover, my parents and ancestors all put their resolute mind and conviction in the principles of the Nembutsu and other teachings, and in that resolute mind and conviction they ended their lives and vanished into the clouds of the other world. Here in Japan there are, to be sure, a great many people, both eminent and humble. Yet, while those who adhere to the provisional teachings and the schools based upon them are numerous, I have yet to hear the name of a single individual who puts resolute mind and conviction in the teachings that you have been explaining. Therefore, leaving aside the question of which teachings will lead to good places in the next life and which will lead to bad ones, and not attempting to inquire which teachings are true and which are false, we find that the 5,000 or 7,000 volumes of the Buddhist teachings and the 3,000 or more volumes of the Confucian and Taoist writings all emphasize the importance of obeying the orders of the ruler and complying with the wishes of one's parents. In India, Shakyamuni, the Lord of Teachings, expounded the principles of carrying out filial conduct and repaying one's obligations. And in China, Confucius set forth the way of giving loyal service to the ruler and honoring one's parents as filial offspring should. Persons who are determined to repay the debt of gratitude they owe to their teachers would not hesitate to slice off a piece of their own flesh or cast their bodies away. Among those who were aware of the debt of gratitude they owed to their lords, Hung Yen cut open his stomach and Yu Jiang fell on his sword. And among those who were truly mindful of their obligations to their parents, Ting Lang fashioned a wooden image of his deceased mother, and Han Po Yu wept upon realizing how feeble his aged mother had become when she beat him with her staff. Though Confucianism, Brahmanism, and Buddhism all differ in their doctrines, they are all alike in teaching one to repay debts of kindness and give thanks for favors received. You understand, this is the unenlightened man saying, you make total sense, but I have this duty to my parents, to the ruler, to do as they command, right? Thus, if I were to be the first one to place resolute mind and conviction in a doctrine that neither the ruler, my teacher, or my parents put resolute mind and conviction in, I would surely be guilty of the charge of turning against them, would I not? At the same time, the passages from the sutras that you have quoted make perfectly clear the truth of this doctrine, and all my doubts about it have been resolved. And if I do not prepare myself for the life hereafter, then in my next existence I will find myself submerged in suffering. Whether I try to go forward or retreat, my way is beset by difficulties. What am I to do? Now again, we've talked about this this mindset of this life, afterlife. It's still extant today. I mean, look at how much religion in the world. Billions of people praying and practicing like they're inviting death so they can get out of here and move on to some better place. Buddhism is not that. Buddhism is about this life. This is the life. Anyway, it's still in the rhetoric. The sage replies, "You understand this doctrine, and yet you can say a thing like that. Have you failed to comprehend the logic of the matter, or is it simply beyond your understanding?" Ever since I began to study the law handed down from Shakyamuni Buddha and undertook the practice of Buddhist teachings, I have believed it is most important to understand one's obligation to others and made it my first duty to repay such debts of kindness. In this world, we owe 4 debts of gratitude. One who understands this is worthy to be called human, while one who does not is no more than an animal. As I wish to assist my father and mother, as I wish to assist my father and mother to a better life in their next existence and repay the debt that I owe to my country, I am willing to lay down my life simply because I understand the debt that I owe to them and for no other reason. Now, let me ask you to close your eyes, still your mind, and apply your thoughts to the logic of the matter. If, knowing the best path, one sees one's parents or sovereign taking an evil path, can one fail to admonish them? If a fool crazed with wine is about to drink poison, can one, knowing this, not try to stop him? In the same way, if one understands the truth of the Buddhist teachings and knows the sufferings of fire, blood, and swords, can one fail to lament at seeing someone whom one owes a debt of gratitude about to fall into the evil paths? Rather, one should cast away one's body and lay down one's life in an effort to save such a person. One will never grow weary of admonishing him, nor will there be limits to one's grief. Again, this is about Shakabuku, isn't it? And Soju. The sufferings that meet our eyes in this present world are lamentable enough. How much more lamentable are those that one will encounter on the long road of death? The long road of death, again, is an allusion to moments of existence, the 3,000 realms in each moment of life, arising and falling away, birth and death. Each moment is a birth and death, birth and death, birth and death. So the next life is the next moment. We live in the moment. So when you think in the moment, then you're dealing in birth and death each moment. So the next existence is the very next moment. The sufferings that meet our eyes in this present world are lamentable enough. How much more lamentable are those that one will encounter on the long road of death? How can we fail to be pained at the thought of it? A thing to be boundlessly feared is the life hereafter. A matter of greatest concern is the existence to come, this next moment. And yet you say that without inquiring into what is right and what is wrong, you will follow your parents' orders. Without attempting to determine what is correct and what is erroneous, you will obey the words of the sovereign. To a fool, such conduct may appear to be loyal and filial, but in the opinion of a wise person, there can be no greater disloyalty, no greater departure from filial piety. Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of Teachings, was a descendant of the wheel-turning kings, the grandson of King Simahahanu, and the heir of King Shuddhodana, and should by rights have become a great ruler of the 5 regions of India. But he awakened to the truth of impermanence of life, and grew to abhor the world, desiring a way to escape this realm of suffering and attain emancipation. Right? This is the foundation of Buddhism. King Shuddhodana, grieving at this, cleverly contrived to have the sights of the 4 seasons displayed to their best advantage in the 4 directions, so that the prince might be diverted from his intention. First in the east, where a break appeared in the trailing mist, he pointed out the wild geese crying as they made their way back north. The blooms blooming by the window, their fragrance wafting through the beaded blinds, the entrancing hues of the flowers, the countless calls of the bush warblers, and other sights of spring. In the south he showed him the crystal colors of the fountains, the deutzia flowers blooming beside the clear flowing streams, the cuckoos of Shinunda forest, and the other signs of summer. In the west there were the autumn-reddened leaves mingling with the evergreens to weave a pattern of brocade, the breezes blowing gently over the reed flowers, or the stormy winds that swept wildly across through the pines, and as if to remind one of the departed summer, there were the fireflies glimmering by the swamp side, so numerous that one might mistake them for the stars in the heavens, and the repeated voices of the pine cricket and the bell cricket, bringing one to tears. And in the north, before one knew it, there was a melancholy color of withered fields, the rims of the ponds sealed with ice, and the sad sounds of the little streams in the valley. Not only did the king attempt to console his son's mind by presenting the world to him in this way, he also assigned 500 soldiers to guard each of the 4 gates of the palace. But in the end, when the prince was 19, at midnight on the 8th day of the 2nd month, he summoned his groom Chandaka, ordered him to saddle his horse Kanthaka, and made his way out of the city of Gaya. He entered Mount Dandaka, where for 12 years he gathered firewood on the high slopes, drew water in the deep valleys, and performed various austerities and difficult practices. At the age of 30 he attained the wonderful fruit of enlightenment, becoming the only one worthy of honor in the threefold world and the Lord of all teachings that he expounded throughout his life. He brought salvation to his father and mother and opened the way for all beings. Could such a man be called unfilial? Wow. That's the most elaboration on Siddhartha Gautama that I've read. The 95 schools of Brahmanis were the ones who accused the Buddha of being unfilial. But by disobeying the command of his father and mother and entering the realm of the unconditioned, he was, on the contrary, able to lead his father and mother to salvation, thus demonstrating that he was in fact a model of filial piety. King Wonderful Adornment, the father of pure storehouse and pure eye, adhered to the non-Buddhist teachings and turned his back on the teachings of Buddha. His 2 sons and heirs disobeyed their father's orders and became disciples of Cloud Thunder Sound King Buddha, but in the end, they were able to guide their father so that he became a Buddha called Salt Tree King. Could anyone say, then, that these were unfilial sons? There is a passage in a sutra that says, by renouncing one's obligations and entering the Buddhist life, one can truly repay those obligations in full. Thus, we see that one who casts aside all bonds of indebtedness and love in this present life and enters into the true path of Buddhism is the one who really understands the meaning of obligations. Moreover, I know the depths of the obligation owed to one's ruler far better than you do. If you really wish to show that you understand your debt of gratitude, then you should admonish the ruler from the depths of your heart and forcefully advise him. To follow his orders even when these are contrary to what is right is the act of utter sycophant and the height of disloyalty. King Chao of the Yin dynasty was an evil ruler, and Pikan his loyal minister. When Pikan saw that the king was going against what was right in ruling the nation, he vigorously admonished him. As a result, Pikan's breast was ripped open, but after his death, King Chao was overthrown by the king of the Chao. To the present day, Pikan has been known as a loyal minister, and King Chao as an evil ruler. When Quan Lung Feng admonished his sovereign, King Chie of the Xian dynasty, he was beheaded. But King Chie has come to be known as an evil ruler, and Quan Lung Feng as a loyal minister. We are taught that if one admonishes one's sovereign 3 times, and still one's advice is not heeded, then one should retire to the mountain forests. Why do you nevertheless remain silent while the ruler commits misdeeds in your full view? I have gathered together a few examples of worthies of ancient times who did in fact retire from the world to dwell in the mountain forests. Open your obstinate ears and listen a moment. During the Yin dynasty, Tai Quang Wang hid himself in a valley called Po Chi. In the Chao dynasty, Po Yi and Shu Qi secluded themselves on Mount Shuyang. Qi Li Qin of the Qin dynasty retired to Mount Shang. Yang Quang of the Han dynasty lived in a solitary lodge, and Qi Tzu Sui of the state of Qin became a recluse on Mount Mingshang. Are we to call these men disloyal? Anyone who would do so is a fool. If you understand what it means to be loyal, you will admonish your sovereign, and you will want to be filial. You must speak up. And on that note, I'll have to continue this in another video. Anyway, I hope you're getting a lot out of this. Nichiren is leaving no stone unturned, if you will, as to questions certainly during his day and that you would hear in some form today. The same kinds of reticence and really fears and misinformation persist to this day. This is the latter age of the law. Shakyamuni predicted this. Nichiren shows the scholarship that demonstrates not only that this is our state of affairs, but also how to clear our minds of it. And that's the brilliant advent of Nichiren's dialogues for us today. So I hope that you're feeling inspired and strong and getting a more resolute mind in practicing the correct way of living your life. I appreciate your following along, and I look forward to the next one. See you soon. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo.